It's the 12th of June, 1944, 6 days after D-Day, and the air over Advanced Landing Ground B-2 near Bazenville, Normandy, smells of aviation fuel, scorched grass, and wet canvas tents pitched too close to the runway. Engines cough and roar somewhere down the strip, drowning out the distant rumble of artillery still echoing from the front lines barely 10 miles away. Ground crews move fast, boots sinking into the half-dried mud churned up by bulldozers that carved this airfield out of a French wheat field less than a week earlier. Spitfire Mark IXs sit in rough dispersal bays, some patched with fabric and dope, others stripped bare, engine cowlings off, exposing Merlin engines glistening with oil under the gray morning light. This is the world of the RAF's mobile repair sections. Men working with spanners, hand pumps, and whatever they could scavenge, racing against time to put broken fighters back into the sky. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to go back further, to the years before the invasion, when Britain's aircraft industry built something almost as important as the Spitfire itself, a system to keep it flying. The Civilian Repair Organization, formed in 1940 under Lord Beaverbrook's Ministry of Aircraft Production, had already proven that damaged Spitfires didn't have to be scrapped. Crashed airframes, salvaged from fields and hedgerows across southern England, were stripped down to their rivets and rebuilt, sometimes from the wreckage of 2 or 3 different aircraft fused into one flyable machine. By the time of the Normandy landings, that same philosophy, repair, don't replace, had been pushed forward with the armies themselves, embedded in mobile units following just behind the front line. These units were officially called Forward Repair Units and Mobile Servicing Units, attached to the 2nd Tactical Air Force. Their job was brutal in its simplicity: keep the Spitfires flying, no matter what broke, no matter what was missing. Spare parts shipped from England were often delayed by the chaos of the beachhead supply chain. Convoys bottlenecked at Mulberry Harbors, lorries bogged down on shattered roads. So mechanics adapted. They pulled instruments from aircraft too badly damaged to fly again. They fashioned replacement parts from sheet metal scavenged off wrecked German vehicles. A missing canopy latch, a cracked radiator, a punctured fuel tank. None of it meant a grounded fighter. Not if the crew could help it. What you're about to hear is the story of how these men, fitters, riggers, engine mechanics, many barely out of their teens, kept the legendary Spitfire in the fight, using nothing but ingenuity, scavenged steel, and sheer stubborn determination in the deadliest flying summer of the war. By late June 1944, the airfield scattered across the Normandy bridgehead had become a graveyard of broken machines and a workshop of desperate invention. At B-2 Bazenville and nearby strips like B-3 at St. Croix-sur-Mer, Spitfire squadrons of the 2nd Tactical Air Force were flying 3, sometimes 4 sorties a day, strafing convoys, escorting bombers, dueling Luftwaffe fighters in the chaos above the Bocage country. Every sortie meant a chance of returning with flak holes stitched through the wings, a punctured coolant line, or worse, an engine seized mid-flight from combat damage. The mechanics waiting on the ground never knew exactly what was coming back, only that it had to fly again by morning. Picture a fitter named, as so many were, barely 20 years old, sleeves rolled up, hands black with engine oil, crouched under a Spitfire's belly as dusk falls. The aircraft has a cannon shell hole clean through its port wing, narrowly missing the main spar. No replacement wing skin is coming from England tonight. So he does what crews up and down the beachhead were doing constantly. He scavenges. A written account from RAF ground crew memoirs describes mechanics cutting patches from the aluminum skin of wrecked aircraft, salvaged from crash sites just beyond the perimeter, hand-forming the metal to match the curve of the wing, then riveting it into place by lamplight. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't textbook, but it held. Engines posed the hardest puzzle. The Merlin 66, powering most Spitfire IXs flying close support over Normandy, was a precision machine. Yet mechanics in the field routinely swapped components between aircraft, cannibalizing irreparable airframes for carburetors, magnetos, and exhaust stubs. Official RAF maintenance record from 1944 confirmed that robbing, as it was informally called, was sanctioned practice under combat conditions, provided paperwork eventually caught up with reality. Spitfires sometimes flew missions wearing parts from 3 or 4 different aircraft, their identities blurred into a single patchwork machine that technically belonged to no one and everyone. Here's a detail that surprises most people. Radiators were among the most fragile components, easily punctured by ground fire during low-level strafing runs, and yet replacements were chronically scarce. Mechanics found that radiator cores salvaged from crashed Hurricanes, with careful modification, could sometimes be fitted to keep a Spitfire's cooling system functional. It shouldn't have worked. But under the pressure of a 1-week turnaround between Allied breakout operations, rarely stopped anyone. And then, in late July, came a test of everything these crews had built. A moment when scavenged ingenuity would be pushed further than anyone expected. The test came during Operation Goodwood, the last week of July 1944, when British and Canadian armor pushed east of Cannes and the RAF flew an unrelenting tempo of ground attack sorties to support them. Squadron diaries from 401 and 402 squadrons, flying Spitfire IXs out of the Normandy strips, recorded aircraft returning from missions with damage that, by any peacetime standard, would have grounded them for weeks. One Spitfire came back with its elevator trim tab shot away entirely. The pilot fighting the controls the whole way home, sweat soaking through his flight suit, arms trembling from the strain of holding the aircraft level by brute force alone. On the ground, the fitters didn't see a wreck. They saw a puzzle. Working through the night under blackout conditions, torches dimmed, voices low, the distant crump of artillery a constant reminder of how close the front really was. The ground crew salvaged a trim tab assembly from a cannibalized airframe nearby, reshaped its mounting points by hand, and had the aircraft back in flying condition before dawn. Imagine the tension in that moment. No manual covered this exact repair, no spare part technically matched, and yet by sunrise, the Spitfire lifted off the strip again, engine roaring clean and steady, as if nothing had ever happened. This wasn't a single miracle. It was the pattern. Across the summer of 1944, mobile repair and servicing units kept aircraft availability rates remarkably high, despite supply chains stretched thin across a beachhead still under artillery range. Official accounts credit this resilience not to abundance, but to scarcity, to mechanics who treated every wreck as a parts bin, every broken Spitfire as a donor for another survival. It was unglamorous work, rarely photographed, rarely remembered in the way pilots and dogfights are remembered. But without it, the Spitfires simply don't fly. The legend stays grounded, literally, in the mud of Normandy. What strikes you, looking back from where we stand today, is how human the whole story really is. No advanced diagnostics, no spare parts catalog, no margin for error, just exhausted young men, oil under their fingernails, solving problems with whatever the battlefield gave them. It's a kind of engineering courage history rarely puts in the spotlight, the quiet bravery of keeping something broken flying anyway. So the next time you see a Spitfire climb into the sky at an air show, polished and pristine, remember the men who once rebuilt those same aircraft from wreckage, by lamplight, working against the clock. What would you have done, kneeling in that mud, with a war depending on your next repair? Let us know in the comments. And if stories like this deserve to be remembered, consider subscribing for more.